Welcome back to Reunited States, the podcast where we bring rational discourse back to our national dialogue. From Manchester, New Hampshire, I am Jesse Saywell.
And from Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Eric.
And we have a guest on this week, a very special guest, a good friend of mine, who I have known for many years now, the immensely talented mother of two now, congratulations.
Thank you.
Kieara Kurtz-Williams is here from Mesa, Arizona. It's still Mesa, right?
Yeah, I'm still in Mesa.
Mesa, Arizona, so somehow even hotter than it is here. And even hotter than where Tyler and I just left yesterday from New Orleans. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kieara. You know, you and I have been having these conversations for a long time, and we're not always 100% in agreement about everything. We're also very rarely 100% in disagreement about things.
True.
And so it's, you know, we're all about being able to have kind of civil dialogue in which we disagree with each other, and we want to have people on the podcast that bring different perspectives. And if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of shit going on in this country right now.
Yeah. Lots of things.
Yeah, and I wish I could say that a lot of it was good, but it's an interesting time. It's an interesting time to be alive, and certainly an interesting time for us to be able to get a variety of perspectives and talk about kind of some of these issues that are really, I think, not just dividing the country, but really Democrats. And so one of the things I want to kind of pick your brain on, as somebody who I would assume identifies, correct me if I'm wrong, as a progressive person, yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm probably like the liberal left Trump's is so scared of, but maybe not that far, but probably pretty far too.
Yeah. Yes. And to, again, a voice that needs to be heard, and a perspective that we need. And so I'm kind of interested to hear your thoughts and see where do we agree, where do we disagree on, and what can we find wise of common ground today, in terms of strategy. Because Tyler and I are always like, it's not just, and I know you and I have had these discussions as well, it's not just what you would like to happen, it's how do we actually get that done.
Right.
And so the big topic, y'all, if you haven't been listening or paying attention to the news, and if you haven't, I don't blame you. It's summertime, I understand. Like, also just like, it's exhausting out there. Every week is something new. And this one matters to me especially because I went to college at American University in D.C. I lived in and around D.C. for 5 years. I care about that city. It's not home to me anymore, but it is an important city in my evolution as a person. And so this recent kind of takeover of D.C., which is essentially what's going on. Donald Trump has said that there is too much crime in Washington, D.C., and he has ordered 800 National Guardsmen to essentially be like a police force supplement in the city to try and crack down on crime. We're going to crack down on it. We're going to take it. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a beautiful city again. We're going to get it under control.
Ignore the fact that the crime's going down. Doesn't matter. It's going up.
It's going up. What are you talking about? It's going up.
Sorry, fellas.
That's all fake data.
I don't have a good Trump impression.
That's probably a good thing.
It's really a good thing,
need to
I assure you. This is, yeah. But anyway, mine's going to ruin my relationship one of these days. So Trump is sending National Guardsmen to D.C., and I doubt there's anyone on this podcast right now who's in favor of him doing that.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, Tyler, you can make that argument if you'd like. You know, this is a pattern, though. You know, he sent National Guardsmen without a request from the governor in California. That has, you know, that went to courts and whatnot. And when he sent him into Los Angeles. For a bullshit reason, of course, again. But D.C. has no statehood, and as such, DC is the kind of responsibility of Congress to oversee DC, and for the most part, Congress has not tried to intervene and overstep over the years. They've let the DC City Council, DC Mayor run the city, because, otherwise it does kind of feel like, martial law military shit coming in there and taking over the nation's capital. Trump doesn't care. In fact, I think he likes that. But yes, DC, he's claiming that there's massive crime, that this is, this is a public disaster, it's a crisis. And I'm curious about how do Democrats respond? Because there's really very little we can do to stop him from doing this, especially in D.C. But what happens when it starts to spread to Baltimore, Chicago, Philadelphia? What other cities can I think of that have black mayors? Let's be honest here. So I guess, Kieara, my first question to you is, what can Democrats do? What do you think they should be doing in response to this?
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of been the question this entire time, right? Like, since January, is what can they do? And I think we've seen a lot of, you would probably call performative, maybe stunts, as you will.
Your buddy Cory Booker.
Hey. Whoa. Not my buddy. I liked the stunt. He's not my favorite, but I think we have to kind of just go back to like information, right? I think the good thing that Democrats have been doing is getting the word out about what's actually happening. I think, weirdly, there are more Republicans, I would say like the right wing, even like MAGA base, that feel like they're having like an awakening of information. I'm looking at tweets from Marjorie Taylor Greene being like, do we agree? Are we agree? And it feels weird in my body, but it's just because she's indoctrinated, right? Like, and so she's been given more information than she had and is seeing things with her own eyes to know, like, hey, this doesn't really make sense. This isn't adding up. This isn't actually what the base wants. And so I think that's a start, right? Is like getting out there, like when Republicans stopped doing town halls and Democrats started stepping up and doing them in those like heavily Republican districts, right? Like just talking about like what is actually happening. I fear we've gotten to a point even where even the MAGA base doesn't really have the power to sway him or stop him. But if there is a future where we still have elections, at least we know like people are going to the polls much more informed about what is actually happening. It's really easy when his base is not in DC to convince them of what's happening there, right? Like for him to say, there's so much crime and there's so much this and I'm actually protecting. But when you start actually showing what's actually happening and what he's doing and how, I mean, this whole argument about that when January 6th, Nancy Pelosi, I don't even have the power to do that. All of a sudden now, for essentially no reason, you have all the power. It's
great point.
It's really insane. But yeah, I think Democrats really have to like triple down on the message. They have to just communicate with everyone, not just their base, everyone. And I think you guys were bringing up last week on your podcast about all of the choices not being like inherently bad, inherently good. And I think it's the same with people, like with constituents as well, right? I think I have more in common with MAGA Republicans as far as like what I want for America than I think moderates even sometimes, right? It's like I think they've just been manipulated into thinking that the reason they don't have those things are because of immigrants and people who don't look like them committing crimes in cities they don't live in, border issues when they don't live anywhere near a border, things like that. So, yeah, I think really tripling down on the message. I will be honest and say, like, political law, I don't know. What can they legally do? Like, what's the action portion of that? I have no clue. It can't be nothing. I mean, ultimately, I think even talking about Chuck Schumer, I think that's really like the most frustrating part is this, like, you're there, you're the person, do something. It could be wrong, right? You could make the wrong choice and, like, okay, pick up the pieces, let's do something else. Let's try something else. But this, like, our hands are just so tied attitude, I think, is what is really frustrating. I think especially younger voters. It feels very much like, hey, our lives are on the line. Can you do something? Anything, please? So yeah.
Kieara, you mentioned Chuck Schumer. That's from before we started recording, we were dunking on Chuck Schumer as normal, everyone, as we do. So come on the pod, Chuck. Get yourself the Chuck out of here and get on the pod. But Tyler, yeah, your thoughts. Sorry.
You mentioned something interesting. I know we talked about like performative actions a bit ago. And I'm wondering how much of the DC thing is performative on Trump's end, because much like when he sent the National Guard to LA because he's, scared of all 100%. Of us, at City Hall with our signs or wherever, but ultimately them being there was a quite literal waste of money. And while I'm not saying we should do nothing, I'm wondering how much of the strategy should be ignoring the performance, knowing that a lot of what he's expecting is some sort of like physical reaction to the presence of the National Guard being there. Because that was a big thing of what happened in LA. He sent people there, and although this is kind of speculation, I think it's widely understood that he expected some sort of retaliation, physical retaliation, a Rodney King-esque, escalation of violence. And when that didn't happen, they just went home. And it was largely a huge waste of money, of congressional funds, of which he got, he got a lot of flack from within his own party as well. And I'm wondering, is there something that we can do along the same veins, since he is already having that like problem within his own base of other Republicans ask him, like, why are you doing this? Like, this makes no sense. And largely letting him kind of play out this, like, really dumb fantasy of, like, a militarized DC until he realizes it's a waste of money. No one's going to be attacking these officers. They can just go home, and have him suffer the fallout within his own party because of that.
I mean, ultimately, he's a TV personality. He's here for the drama. He's here for the performance, for sure. Bad publicity is still good publicity, like that kind of thing. That's literally how he operates all the time. So I totally could see that as, definitely a piece of it. I do think that, and I'm from LA. I obviously was not there during that time. But I think, I guess my worry is performative or not, it's unsafe for the people in DC. And I think it whether or not it escalates to a Rodney King level of conflict, it's unsafe for the people, particularly the people who look like me, right? And so I think that's kind of I also think that the let him do what he wants and don't pay attention is a little bit of how we got here. I think a lot of people brushed it off as performance and whatever, and meanwhile he's literally speaking to these people's to their interests and rallying up these people when we were saying, just don't pay attention to him. And that's how he sneakily, rose to power in a sense. So I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I think Gavin Newsom putting eyes in LA helped, right? I think a part of that whole strategy of they don't belong here, don't engage, was Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom fully. It was their message, right? It was what they were saying. It was what they were putting out there. But they were also in full support of protesters as well. So I think that wasn't necessarily a do nothing strategy, even still, right? It was something, not necessarily a physical reaction, but it was something.
Yeah, the something was nothing of a sort.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm glad you said that because I hear that a lot, right? I hear a lot of the, it's just don't engage and they won't engage. But you're right, that can have its own kind of issues with that. And there's going to be segments of the population that are inherently under more threat than others because of just the mere presence of that. So I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a great point.
Yeah, I this is so interesting to me. I guess, so you guys have touched on, like, kind of what should we be doing? And I have something that jumps out at me as what the Democrats should not be doing. Especially, and this may not be popular with the general broader public, but I think it's a mistake that Democrats keep making, and it's one I've seen several people mention in recent days, which is to deny the problem. Like, Trump is very good at identifying problems that exist, and yes, crime is going down in D.C. Crime in D.C. is also higher. It is a more dangerous place in many places than it is throughout much of the nation. That is partially just the reality of living in an urban area. Like, that's just a reality. But even in comparison to urban areas, D.C. has not done a great job. As a city that I love and lived in for years, it has not done a great job over the last 15, 20 years of always handling crime. And it has seemingly gotten worse since I've gone back and visited. Like, it is more visible in many places. And so, yes, crime may be going down, but I can tell you my friends in D.C., they haven't noticed that. And this is not, they're conservatives. These are liberal people, left-leaning people to very far left-leaning people who would tell you that D.C. crime is still very visible. Trump identifies problems that are real and then baits Democrats into saying that's not real. And then we look ridiculous. I mean, so if we look back at inflation last year, Democrats just kept saying inflation is going down, but that's not how people feel. Like, and inflation was yes, it was going down, but it still was significantly higher than what it had been in the past. Cost of living, price of just existing was higher, and Democrats did not do a good enough job of saying, yeah, you know what, this is a problem and here's how we're going to fix it. And so what I really am concerned about is that the narrative seems to be, well, crime in D.C. is going down. Yes it is. And I'm not saying you shouldn't say that, but you have to say, we have a crime problem in Washington, D.C. that we are addressing, and here's how. And it's not where we want it to be, but sending in the National Guard is not going to solve this. This is performative, and they're not making that distinction. And when you don't make the distinction, you act like the problem doesn't exist. You've lost half the audience or more. The people who are just like, you're just saying, you're bullshitting me. You're telling me that what I'm seeing with my own eyes is not true. And we've seen that with not just like centrist or right-wing voters. We've seen that with left-wing voters in recent years. Tyler, you and I were just talking the other day about San Francisco and how when I recently went to San Francisco a couple years ago, I was shocked at like what a different city it felt like from the first times I had visited. Glass everywhere, from smash and dash. Like, there's the feces problem throughout San Francisco. There was the shoplifting problems, and the now former mayor, London Breed, was largely saying, these issues are not as bad as they seem, etc. Well, they got her out of there, and they replaced her with kind of a centrist white dude who came in there, and he's like, I'm literally going to get this shit off the streets. And I'm not advocating one way or the other in the politics of that. I'm just saying that that's not a winning strategy with anyone, to ignore the problem. And I feel like Trump just baits us into this. And then we wait for him to say something inflammatory, as if that's going to change anyone's mind. Everything he says is inflammatory. He can come out tomorrow and be like, these are dark places. You know, he can make like the worst fucking horrible things he can say, the most obviously race-baiting, you know, preying on the worst instincts of your middle-class white voter. He can do that. It's not going to change anything if we're denying that a problem exists, because they've seen that with their own eyes. And so I do worry about that. Like, how do we balance that? How do we respond to that without, you know, like, we can't acknowledge and say, wow, our cities are pieces of shit, because they're not. But we also, if you just deny, that just doesn't work if we're denying the reality of the situation, I guess. Kara, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I think the problem is too many cooks in the kitchen on that. I think we have mayors and city council people who live in these cities. They live and work and they have families in these places, and I think they should be the face of the responses to kind of these attacks, because I think they'll have the most honest and genuine kind of responses to it, right? Because they are the people that are living with those issues day to day. But they're also probably seeing the ways in which the community shows up to solve those problems, and in the ways in which they show up for each other too. And so I think the problem is, especially, I mean, obviously we're talking about DC, like, right? Like, the Capitol's there. And so you have these, like, big 2028 Republican or Democrats, coming out to want to be the face of, you know, pushing back against what he's doing. But I really think the message should come from the people who live and breathe these issues, and whose constituents put them in the position to represent them and support them. So I think that alone could shift that completely. Is just like, I live here, I work here. My grandmother owned a dress shop down the street. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I think it's never gonna feel genuine. It's never gonna feel like the message is correct with somebody who lives there part-time and doesn't actually live in the part of the city that's going to be affected the worst. So
yeah, I mean, I wonder, like, the first strategy that comes to my head is, you know, Mayor Bowser should just come out and say, okay, we're going to have well, she's terrified, because if we're being honest, she's terrified that Trump's just going to, like, remove her from office, which he technically could. He could just declare martial law in D.C. because there is no statehood, there's no balance there. He could just do that and just kick her out of office. So I feel like, you know, we saw this. She took down Black Lives Matter Plaza. Like, that got taken down. There's been several things where he's clearly, like, basically blackmailing her into, you know, to silence. But it would be really nice to see Democrats have a parade that is not, like, just fuck Trump in D.C. How about have a We Love D.C. Day? Like, and it is a defending the fact that we love our city. Like, show the rest of the country that this city is not as terrible as what it's being portrayed, that there is a system of love here, that it is a safe place to walk around, that we want our communities here. Have that and make it a message of positivity, because, you know, if you look at the Kamala Harris campaign last year, like, the moment when she was at her highest was when we were feeling good about ourselves, like when it seemed like it was a fun moment to be involved in. And I know there's not much fun right now living in Trump's America. But we have to find ways to bring people and make them feel somewhat optimistic about the world around us. And if we're countering his nonsense with, actually, this is the way this city is, this is the character of our city, we're locals, we live here, And we don't just put a whole bunch of Cory Bookers and people who live there part-time out in front of it. That would be a winning argument, I think. And I say this, do I think DC's going to do it? No. Do I think Democrats are going to do that? No. They're as addicted to outrage as anyone because they profit off of it. But if a guy like Wes Moore in Maryland is looking at Baltimore, which Baltimore is next, it's coming. Like, Trump's going to send it into Baltimore. The D.C. thing is a trial run. L.A. was a trial run. Like, Baltimore is next. He would love to do that. If Wes Moore wants to look at this as the governor of Maryland, he needs to... Maryland's a very proud state. It's my home state. He needs to be ready for this and say, okay, how do we respond? Not just, oh, I'm not going to let the National Guard come in here, but also, how do I show the people of Maryland saying, no, we don't live in a shithole. The people of Baltimore, we don't live in a shithole. Like, this is what we're proud of in this community. Because there are a lot of proud people in these areas that, I think would be open to that, and might even be more open to that than like an angry protest where we go out and say down with the king. We've done a lot of that recently, and we should continue to do that. But some level of positive fighting back, I think, might be beneficial. Tyler, what do you think?
I love it, and I agree with you that it would be a million times more productive. I just don't see how it's possible with the way people think. Because when you look at the protests that we have had in the last year, right, or even before then, it's like the largest protests are fueled by an anger, a frustration, right? Something that, that irks you, something that sincerely bothers you to your core. Like, that is what gets you out in the streets. That's what gets people on the streets that don't normally go out on the streets, right? It's not like I agree with you. The positivity thing is definitely the right move to make in terms of like the message. I just don't think it's an effective tool at getting people out. Like, we can organize it. It's not going to get near the numbers that No Kings did, because it's not the emotion that gets people to leave their door and make signs and go out and in some instances put their lives at risk, right? In the worst cases, to go out and put themselves out there. That's my issue with that. And again, I agree with it. I think the messaging is right. I don't see how that's going to be an effective motivator for the actual numbers that we need to make that an effective movement. But I do, at the same time, I do think that something that can help is something that we talked about before, is a leader. I think having a leader, having one person that can embody that positivity would help. I think that would be step one. If we were to do that, it would be the one person that really champions the positivity movement. Because without it, it's just a bunch of people, and most of them are going to be angry. And when I talk about like the potential of like when I talk about weighing what to ignore versus what to focus on, a big part of that fear of too much focusing is that I think a lot of us know that Trump is doing this to waiting for the moment for someone to strike back violently. And he's going, and this is more my hypothesis, is that he is going from city to city until one of those cities, somebody in one of those cities does something, and now he can take action on it. Direct physical action on it. He tried it in LA because it's happened in LA before. It didn't work, right? We had largely, almost entirely peaceful protests. So we left, and now he's in DC, trying this in DC. If it's unsuccessful, he might go to Baltimore next. He might go to Chicago. He might go to he just go from city to city until waiting for the opportunity because he can do it, right? That's kind of like, and that's where I get a lot of that fear coming in, right? Of like, we need to do something to counteract this, but I know that he is just waiting for someone to throw a rock, and someone will. if we don't really pull everyone together under a unified message. But it's just so hard because everyone is so easily motivated by anger and frustration. It's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right.
It's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
It's a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, you're right. You have no idea what city it could be next. The cities he lists are always the ones that have black mayors. I mean, that's it. And to be honest, if you look back at the 2020 election, it was all cities with high black populations that he claimed that were fraudulent and all of this. Like, there is just this undercurrent of racism that exists in all his language.
In the same vein, it's cities that a lot of the conservative right claim are like have higher crime rates, and a lot of that has unfortunately a lot of like racist undertones to that, and a lot of them say it outright. We saw it on I think Charlie Kirk or one of those idiots said it.
Yeah, I shared that on
yes.
Instagram a few weeks ago.
Charlie
Kirk
how he was like saying,
very
black Americans
statements.
they're more of them are criminals or whatever the verbiage was, but that rhetoric is a big motivating factor to where they're going, right? It's a lot of like the racist undertones and as to where they are choosing to try and like incite violence. Because that's what they want. Yeah. They want the violence.
Yeah, and going back again, though, it's not especially helpful usually to be like, wow, he's being racist. Like, that hasn't worked, and that's the flip side. Like, we can have that discussion here, and we can talk because it seems pretty clear to anyone that's looking at it objectively, but it hasn't helped. Calling that sort of thing out has not worked for us, sadly. And that's where the politics nationally are very different than the politics in these inner cities. And I guess that leads me into kind of the next topic here, which is the recent election, or at least for the Democratic nomination of Zohran Mamdami. God, I will get it right, I swear. It's not that hard. Zohran Mamdami as the Democratic nominee for mayor. And Kieara, you may be familiar, you may not, but Tyler and I have voiced some concerns. We like aspects of Mamdani a lot. We are not Cuomo people, obviously. We're not Mayor Eric Adams people. That's not where we lie on the spectrum here. With that being said, I have concerns about Mamdani personally. There are aspects of things that he has kind of softened on in recent weeks that have helped. But I'm more concerned about lack of experience than anything, and some of the proposals that he's making, as much as I inherently love that idea, I'm not sure how plausible those are for implementing in New York City. I guess the question is not really about specific policies that he's proposing. You're not a New Yorker. I'm not going to ask you about any of that. I'm curious about the broader Democratic movement, because I want the energy that he inspires in younger voters. But I also recognize that Zohran Mamdani is likely going to be the next mayor of the largest city in this country. As an open democratic socialist, probably the furthest left candidate to be elected to a significant office in American history, I am worried about how that is going to impact people who are in the places that we're trying to win back. North Carolina, Senate races in Maine, talking about Missouri, Texas, these places that are just not there. Arizona, for that matter, of course. You live in a very purple state, of course. I'm worried that Mamdani will be, because he's in this position, and if things go badly with certain things, I worry that it could really hurt the Democratic brand nationally if we get associated too much with his brand of politics. But also, if we distance ourselves too much, then young people are going to be all up in arms like, oh, well, the Democratic Party doesn't value us, whatnot. Kieara, do you share these concerns? Are you worried about this at all? Am I overreacting?
I want to, before I answer that specific question, I kind of want to back up because I think something that Tyler was talking about right before was the idea that Trump is looking at these cities and there's going to be an explosion, right? Like someone's finally going to do that thing. But I think the thing that you were talking about, Jesse, right? Like the DC day, I don't think it has to be that specific. And I mentioned this because of Mamdani, right? I think that specifically like New York City felt like it was at a place with Trump especially where like the cork was about to pop. There was so much anger and pressure and disdain toward the general government at large. Especially I think following Luigi Mangione. I think literally there's clearly this like pressure in the city that was about to explode. And then you have Zohran Mamdani on park benches walking the length of Central Park talking to people, bringing joy to the city. Genuinely, I think that is what caused this cool in the city. And I think it doesn't have to be a parade. It doesn't have to be, I think it just has to be something to get excited about. It just has to be something to be proud of. It just has to be something that because I do agree that anger is a much stronger emotion, but I think it's a lot easier to at least put that anger aside when you have something you want to fight for, right? And that's something that you're fighting for brings you joy and gets you excited and gets you going. And I think that that's what Mamdani did for New York City. And so, yeah, Jesse, I think you might be overreacting. And why I say that too is I think for me, at least, and how I've always pictured government in general is the government should be about me, right? Especially when we're talking a mayoral race. Obviously, New York City is very different than Mesa, Arizona, and even Long Beach, California, where I'm from. New York City it's different, right? We're talking a different ball game. And I feel like cities like New York and Chicago and DC also kind of dictate kind of what other cities will do, which is what you're talking about here and what the effects of that will be. But I think what he's shown is that he has his beliefs and he is very connected to what his base wants, but he's also not above critique. And he's also not above listening and hearing out other communities and what is important to them and kind of rearranging that. And I think that's interesting because they have the ranked choice, obviously, voting in New York. And when you see that the majority of the other candidates on that ticket endorsed him as their number 2 person, I think, again, it's like not because, if not me, then him. No, but because they also trusted that he had their community's best interest at heart as well. And I think that's saying something. I think that says something. I do think that lack of experience matters, right? I mean, hello, look at the presidency. look at his entire cabinet. Yikes, right? But I also think that if we want it to work, we can, right? Like, let's put some advisors in place that we trust. And I think that Mamdani is the kind of person who is aware of that. He's not dumb, right? He doesn't know. He's not saying my lack of experience means nothing either, right? But I think the arguments that he's making are valid. He also hasn't had to resign because of sexual assault allegations.
Has not been indicted.
He also has. I just think that it's so easy to say, like, well, he just doesn't. But maybe that's what New York City needs, right? Is someone who grew up there, who knows the people, who the people trust. Because nobody trusts Eric Adams. Nobody trusts Andrew Cuomo. You might think, well, at least he's got experience. Well, at least the powers that be back him. Who gives a damn? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, also, Andrew Cuomo doesn't even live in New York City. He does not know what the people really, really want. And I also think it's interesting, too, that, like, to me, I'm like, if Republicans and Democrats are coming together to fund anti-campaigns against Mamdani, he's got my vote. I'm in. I think if, and I'm not, Republicans and Democrats, that's a really broad and vague, but as far as the big super PACs and the big oligarchy-esque powers that be are saying no to this, obviously that's good for us. That's good for us. That's good because I've been to New York recently. They got to do something about the bus system. They have to do something about the flooding. They have to do something about the subway system. They have to do something about housing. They have to. They have to. And that's from a visitor to New York City. I don't even live there. I was there for 2 weeks recently, and that was enough.
It's a mess.
And I don't hear Eric Adams actually saying anything about how he wants to solve those problems. What I hear him saying is Mamdani can't. I don't hear Andrew Cuomo caring at all about the people in those communities. What I'm hearing is him saying that Mamdani doesn't really. I mean, to me, that like mayoral debate where they just, I would visit Israel, to me was like, this is not a run for the presidency. This is the mayor of a city. What are we talking about? What are we doing? You are so out of touch with what these people want and need. And so, yeah, I think experience is definitely going to come into play for sure. But I think ultimately being a candidate that is only for what people want and at least trying to make the city better and not lining your pockets, I'm in.
You make a very interesting point about the powers that be comment that you made on how like that is sort of becoming a rallying cry for like individual Democrats in the party, how like they see Mamdami as somebody who like the establishment is, whether you want to say they're scared of them or he just doesn't like them or doesn't trust them, whatever. In any case, does not support that his candidacy, and people seeing that as like almost like just a good thing, right? Seeing like this person's anti the Democratic establishment, they're working against him, and and that is actually a point in itself as to why he is somebody that should be supported. And I find that very interesting because that's very similar to what we saw with Trump, right? When, the establishment did not want Trump anywhere near the presidency. Mm-hmm. They worked very, very hard to get eyes off of him during the early primaries. And it was only when they saw that he was going to be the nominee no matter what, and he was going to be who Republicans on the ground were going to back, that they finally kind of gave in. But even now, the establishment is still trying to kind of wrestle control away from him, seeing how things are kind of progressing. So the Republican Party still kind of has that very difficult relationship with Trump as an individual. But that is kind of what fuels his popularity for a large portion of the base. And so seeing that, or seeing you kind of like talk about that from Mamdami's perspective is interesting, because I'm wondering if that is now going to become something that candidates like Mamdami or in a similar position are going to start looking at as ways to kind of garner more support, maybe on a national level or at least in other states, right? Being like, is the option to start bucking the party even harder? Not to say go more left or anything like that, but just kind of push back on the party as an institution.
Sure. I mean, I think at the very least, Democrats across the nation should be taking notes at his campaign. At the very least. I think, the fact that, again, I'm in Mesa, Arizona, and I'm on my TikTok telling my friends in New York, tell me more about this guy. I don't live there, but he's making me excited for New York politics. You know what I'm saying? And I think at the very least, they should be looking at that. Because I think something that Trump did is he made the individual feel important in politics again. And that goes back to what I said. Like, I really think, like, far right and far left have a lot more in common with each other in that sense, of, like, more, I think, middle class, lower class people just struggling. Like, how can we get out of this hole? I think it's just a matter of being manipulated by the wrong people to believe what that solution might be to solve the problem, right? But I have some pretty moderate friends in New York and family in New York too, who are like, yeah, I feel like I still don't know what Eric Adams' campaign is about. He wants me to vote for him, but like, what? For what? For what? What am I voting for? And then Andrew Cuomo, right? Okay, you lost that election by a lot, and now you're just going to run as an independent. So what do you really stand for?
Being a sore loser.
What do you really? Right, exactly. But again, it's like those things. They're so out of touch. They played right into losing again, because that's what's going to happen. It seems.
Well, here's where I am, because you mentioned the ranked choice voting and all these other candidates, whatever. To be honest, I view that as more anti-Cuomo than anything else.
Sure.
In that primary, I think that a lot of that was, and I would have been similar had I been voting in New York. Like, anybody but Cuomo, anybody that can beat Cuomo, it's great. So but again, he got the most first vote ballots as well. It wasn't a majority, but he got a large number of first choice votes. So I view that more as anti-Cuomo. I think he's going to have a tougher time in the general. I'm not saying he's going to lose. I think he's going to win. But I don't think it's going to be this overwhelming decision that maybe we're expecting it to be. And one big reason, 70% of African Americans voted for Cuomo. And that's a huge thing. And this is where I get very concerned about someone like Mamdani, because it's been done very effectively with AOC already on a national level. And this is where I know you're saying I'm overreacting, but we've already seen this happen in statewide elections in other states, where they're asked about positions that are held by someone like AOC, someone like Bernie Sanders, someone like Ayanna Pressley, the list goes on. Or what I view now will be, if Mamdani wins this election, every Senate candidate next year in 2026 in the midterms is going to be asked about Zohran Mamdani and his positions. And that candidate is now going to have to be in a position where they either adopt his ideology, which is obviously very popular with a certain segment of their base, or denounce or distance themselves from certain aspects of his ideology, which potentially alienates that same portion of that base, but potentially makes them more appealing to the swing voters in swing states. And that's the challenge that I see, and it's so interesting. I mean, because we think of, the Democratic... We think of the Democratic Party and who you need to win. You have to be able to win black voters. I mean, Tyler and I were talking the other day about this recent poll that came out where Pete Buttigieg has 16%. He's leading the polls of all candidates for 2028, but he has 0% black support. And like, how can you win with 0% black support? And that's what I worry about. Like in general, I can't speak for everyone, but like if you look at the numbers, black and brown people in this country tend to be more moderate than extreme in either direction. Kieara, I couldn't ask you to speak for all black people by any stretch of imagination, but
please don't.
I would not. But I'm curious to your thoughts on that predicament. Like, how does the party address that?
Yeah, I have a pretty interesting perspective on that. My dad's family is from the South. My mom's family is from the West, right? And so it is really interesting. Like, I I think, and I mean, we could go into the history of all the things, but the answer is slavery always. But always, it truly goes back there. But I think so many Black people's culture, regardless of where they live now, stems from that like traditional mindset of like American Christianity being instilled from back in slavery, right? And I think there's a huge set of especially, I would say, like older millennial, younger, what is it, zillennials, the group after that? I don't know my
we
groups.
Get Gen Z, millennial, Gen Xers.
Gen X is what I'm talking about, yeah. Older millennial Gen X, who are like, I vote the way I vote because my parents voted the way they vote, and and I think it's interesting because it's like Eric Adams is Black, but he's a Republican, and then it's like, I know that's bad, right? And then it's like, I can't trust this guy, but he's the Democrat, and that is just how you vote, right? I think Pete Buttigieg, unfortunately, is going to. He's always going to bump against the rampant homophobia within the Black community, specifically amongst Black men, and that's always going to. That we're just always going to be there, unfortunately for him. And Kamala Harris, I think, also had the same issue. It was Black men, wasn't us. But I think it is going to be a struggle, truly, because Andrew Cuomo, as we've talked about, is like an institution Democrat, right? He is like it's the JFK effect, right? It's like the traditional Democrat is how you were trained to vote. I mean, even my mom is like just D down the line. She doesn't even really think about it, She's not even thinking about it. And I think too, like in Arizona, especially, thinking about our choices too with Democrats, it's like, okay, I think most people in Arizona are like, okay, well, at least we have like one white man who's a Democrat that we can, and then it's like, and then you get your diversity hire as your other senator, right? Every single time, it's like you get your little diversity hire there. And so I think I think the Black community specifically, though, it's like, we're really having this like internal struggle of like, how we're supposed to vote. And if we could just break away from the institutionalized white supremacy in our minds, I think we would see that a lot of us are multifaceted and actually would benefit from even more left-leaning politics, I guess, if you will, or some of the things that your Bernie Sanders offers, rather than someone like Andrew Cuomo. And I think too, speaking from my experience, and I think a lot of Black people would probably have some sort of experience like this, there's a lot of things we don't talk about within the Black community. And it's that they're not going to talk about Andrew Cuomo's sexual assault allegations. I think it's the same thing with Black people who vote for Trump. That's his personal business. I think a lot of Black families have that, like, that's for the home. That's not something that we talk about. That's not something that we discuss. That's not, appropriate, at least. And that's his business. And so I think even you might find that there are maybe even like baby boomer Black men, especially, who are like, we should never even know about that. That's his business. And so they won't fault him for those things because they don't even think we should be talking about it. So it's definitely a struggle. I think, I also think too, and this, I mean, just conversation, my dad is 53 years old. lives in Shreveport, Louisiana. So mindset there, my dad doesn't vote at all, because in his mind, nobody cares about us. So it doesn't matter if there's an R or a D. It really doesn't matter. Nobody cares. And nobody's actually going to help us ultimately. So I think there's also that aspect too within our community as well. So I don't actually have an answer to the question that you asked, Jesse. Just, I guess, my perspective that...
No, it's very valid and valuable. Again...
Yeah, it kind of got me thinking a bit, like, are there, and I don't know if there is or not, it's like, I guess if you have any insight on this would be great, are there, like, certain buzzwords or, like, topics that make it difficult for, like, the African-American population to, I'm speaking very broadly here, to support certain candidates? And the reason I ask is because we see this in the Latino communities with the left specifically, because if we have any far left or even like moderately far left, moderately like, or just left of moderate Democratic candidate like a Bernie Sanders or whatever, all you have to say is communism, and that shuts down every Latino vote, because that to them is like the no word of no words, because a lot of them came from countries that had a lot of issues with communism, with socialism, and with things of that nature, if they were fleeing from Cuba or from any of these other countries. And so when we try and talk to Latino communities about these progressive candidates, once they hear the word communism floated around, even if it's not accurate, but the right will say that immediately shuts them down. That's like the one, they hear that and they need to hear nothing else. And it becomes a huge issue when you're trying to promote people like a Bernie Sanders type, right? When he's just painted as communist, that in itself is enough to deter a lot of those communities. Is there something similar in the African community that would make it difficult to help like them support progressive candidates?
This is going to sound crazy, but I think it's when they talk about black voters. I think, obviously not just generally speaking, but I think a lot of the community feels, again, I can't speak for everybody. I'm very much talking about people I know, my family, myself. I think sometimes it feels like, I know you need me. I know you need my vote. I know how valuable it is to you, and you're gonna say everything you can to get it, but then you're not gonna do anything. And so I also think there's like a secondary piece there. I think especially black men that I know I think it's a pride factor of like, I mean, it just is what it is. It's the reality is that like social services in America, like we use them. I think in the South, especially more white people use them than black people. But I think in American culture, it has become synonymous with black and brown people using, socialist services in America, welfare and Medicare and Medicaid and all of the above. And I think it's a pride thing. I think it's like, we don't want the handout. We don't want the, these things that we can pay for college. We can pay for, I don't know. I think there's also this like secondary piece of like, I don't need you speaking to my hardships. But I also think that comes from, again, a culture of black people not understanding that the government works for us. The government should care about the things that are hard for you. They should fix the things that are hard for you, not make them harder. So I would say probably those two things is like not being able to trust that you're not saying what you're saying just to get my vote. And also just, again, bumping up against this idea that Black people are less than, and fighting over the pride aspect of that to not want a handout for sure.
That's a great point. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
That's actually, that's really, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that's something that a lot of folks, at least that I speak to, it kind of flies over a lot of people's heads that there is, when they look at polling, right? And they look at, like, well, why does this person have, like, you know, like, why did Trump have so much, like, Latino support? That was one thing that I see all the time. Everyone, like, uses it as a point of, a point that, like, you know, that Republicans are doing more for, like, Latinos or something crazy, like, absolutely insane like that. But they use that polling as a way to kind of prove their point. And I think something that gets lost in that discussion is that I think a lot of folks in on the right are just really good at, like, scaring, at least, again, like, from my experience of the Latino culture, Latino population, scaring them away from the left, right? Because they're using, they know how to like say things in a way that kind of, like, gets them to not want anything to do with them. You know, so I think it's like, so thank you so much for your insight on that. It's really, really important.
I think too, a third piece, and I definitely can't speak for the Latino community, but I have heard this as well from Hispanic friends, and I see it as well in the Black community, is, and I'm talking about Black people that vote for Trump here, not people that vote Democrat. Pivot a little. I think it's the fear. It's the fear of white supremacy harming them, right? It's like, but if I just get a little ahead, right? I'm voting for you. I'm on your team. The sharks won't eat me, right? And it's that they're just straight up feeding their own people to the shark to be the meal later, right? I mean, it's that story of you know, Latino man votes for Trump, gets deported, or wife gets deported. You know what I mean? Like that story, and it's like, but we were the good ones. There are no good ones, right? Like, they're sharks. They're gonna eat you, like that ultimately. But I think in thinking about, like, why they would do that, such a thing, I think it's just, there's also, though, that subset of people who try not to get eaten for a longer period of time.
That's a great point.
And this has been true, I mean, for literally all of human history.
Yeah.
Oppressed people finding means of, like, trying to join the system of oppression against their own people.
Of histories of Black slavers, right? Like, even in the U.S. Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, look at now, you know, like, we have, how many members of ICE
Crazy.
do I see that are Latino? Like you know, like, that's a very interesting dynamic there that is going on. But yeah, you know, the one thing I would just add in, as obviously the non-minority person on the panel here, but only is just that there is, the thing I hear from both Latinos and African Americans, and hear it more with African Americans now, and we've been hearing and talking about it with Latinos for the better part of the last decade, is they're not just a monolith. Like, you can't just say, like, African Americans don't all just vote one way. Like, I guess that historically you can probably say that has been true. If you just look at voting patterns in general, that has been true. But they don't all think the same. You talk to African Americans in Georgia are very different from African Americans in California or in Chicago. These are very different places that deal with different problems. And meeting them at that level is really important. It's one of the reasons why Barack Obama was so effective, was that he found ways to communicate with the African American community that felt real to them in various different ways. He didn't treat them all like it was just this big monolith, because he understood those issues inherently, having lived in multiple places around the country, both very white places and very heavily diverse places. And of course, we've been saying that, of course, about the Latino community for well over a decade now, really since Hillary Clinton lost. Like, stop thinking that Latinos in Florida have anything to do with Latinos in Texas, California, or, you know, the Northeast, any of the, like, they come from different places. They have different value sets. They have different backgrounds, different traumas. Like
They might not even be Latino.
Right. Very, very true. Yeah. And so, and in general, don't just make assumptions about people now. And Democrats have been very bad about that. And it has mostly been white Democrats, but it hasn't just been white Democrats making that mistake. And so...
Cory Booker thinking that black people like him.
Wow. Sorry, Corey. Sorry, Corey.
Come on the pod, Corey.
They like you more than they like Chuck Schumer. I promise.
We like you more than Chuck Schumer.
Absolutely.
We like you way more than we like Chuck
Schumer.
Yeah. You can talk for 24 hours. I'll listen to you. Chuck Schumer can't stand for 24
I wasn't concerned
seconds.
about whether or not he could talk for 24 hours, okay? We know he could talk for 24 hours.
That is very true. Well, anyway, thank you, Kieara, so much for joining us this week to discuss this. We really appreciate having you on. You've taken the time to share with us. You're brilliant. I always love having these conversations with you. You bring such an engaging and enlightening perspective to our discussions. I always learn something from you. I feel smarter in talking with you. And these are the types of discussions that we need to have. We need to continue to have with not just our friends, but people who aren't our friends. And so, I just can't thank you enough for taking the time. And of course, the invitation is always open. You want to come on and chat, you know how to reach us. So.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know you've been trying to get me for a little bit.
I know you've been a little busy with
just a little
bringing a human into the world
inside of my body.
Yes. Congratulations again on that.
Yeah, thanks.
You have a beautiful family, and yes, a beautiful baby boy now. I can't believe that.
Crazy.
It's amazing. All right. Well, we will let you go. Thank you so much. And we're going to move on to things we should all agree on. Tyler, do you want to get us started?
Yeah. So this morning I saw some snippets of J.D. Vance, our lovely VP, on Katie Miller's podcast. If you don't know Katie Miller, she is Stephen Miller's wife, and she has a new-ish podcast. Of course, getting all the heavy hitters on her pod, asking all sorts of tough questions like, what kind of ice cream you like? And why did you run after your kids like an ogre at Disneyland? This is quite literally what she asked him. And the best part, of course, who would you, of the entire cabinet, who would you draft first for your basketball team? Do you know who J.D. Vance said?
Who's that?
Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio? Yeah, little Marco?
For real. And she was like, isn't he a bit short?
I mean...
And J.D. Vance was like, yeah, but he's agile and fast.
Oh, God.
This is true. You can watch the entire thing. 100% true. Oh my gosh. I have never seen a lower stakes interview in my life. In my entire life. But this leads into a more serious topic, but from the same interview. Because my things we should all agree on is going to be about parenting again, but it is specifically about certain parenting questions that J.D. Vance was asked on this podcast, and I think he didn't. I think J.D. Vance said a bit too much about how he parents his children, and I think it is, in my opinion, it is concerning. He said them as a joke, but I think that they are a bit concerning. Anyway, so the first thing that bothered me, and the first thing that was of concern, Katie Miller asked him, right off the bat, she asked him, how do you handle a toddler tantrum in a public place? Something everyone can relate to as a parent who's had a toddler, right? It happens everywhere. I've dealt with it already hundreds of times, right? Toddlers between 2-3 years old, They're going to tantrum, and it's going to happen in public spaces, whether it's in an airport, restaurant, whatever. So J.D. Vance responds and says, me and Usha, his wife, handle things very differently. He says, she's the gentle parent. You know, she understands him. She talks to our children like people. And then he goes on to say that one time at an airport, she was approached by a child therapist, or somebody who said they were a child therapist. And that person started praising her parenting style and praising how she was handling this, I guess, outburst that was happening by one of their kids at the airport. And it was like an ah moment, right? And then J.D. Vance continues and says, but I'm different. I'm not like Usha. If I see my toddler having a tantrum, and this is a quote, I quote, I will grab them, take them to the bathroom, and say, you have to cut this shit out, before going back into the public. And he says this and he laughs about it. And Katie fucking Miller laughs about it. Like it's like a punchline of a joke. That's not a joke. That's not something to be proud of. To talk about how your wife is this fantastic parent, applauded by random strangers apparently for, you know, gentle parenting skills, which is a great thing. Understanding a child as a person and not, you know, something to bark orders at or whatever is a fantastic skill, and everyone should be incorporating it, in my opinion. But then using that as the backbone to the joke that is, I yell at my children and swear at them in bathrooms as a way to get them to shut up in a public space. JD, there's something wrong with that. And there's something wrong with utilizing that as like a funny moment. Because there's nothing fun about yelling at kids, man. This ain't the goddamn 30s or whatever, you know? Like when this was like, I guess like widely like the standard way to parent as a father, or even as just a parent in general. You don't do that. And the thing is, it continues. It continues. He was asked some other parenting question later on in the same podcast, same interview. You're gonna laugh at this, Jesse. Katie Miller asks him, would you rather your kids publicly rate your parenting on C-SPAN or never tell a dad joke again? Do you want to know which one he chose?
Which one?
He said, I would choose never to say another bad dad joke in my life. And she was like, oh, wow, that was quick. Why? And she says, well, you know, kids are kids, and we're in a lot of public spaces with cameras always watching our every move and everything. And he said, and again, this is another quote from this interview. He says that his kids would see a camera and say, Dad should have CPS called on him because I didn't get 2 scoops of ice cream last night. And because that's what his kids, I guess, regularly say about him, or the comments that they make about specifically him as a parent, him as a father, he's like, oh yeah, I wouldn't want them publicly rating my parenting on C-SPAN. And he says it like, oh, well, you know, kids are always, you know, when they don't get what they want. I get what the point was. Like, he's trying to make a joke like, oh, kids, when they don't get what they want, you know, they'll, you know, berate you and say you're the worst person on earth and you're like the world's worst parent or whatever. But notice how he didn't say that him and Usha would be talked about that way. He said, I would be talked about that way. And I think, JD, I think you answer your own question when you're talking about your specific parenting, singular parenting style, and you're juxtaposing it with your wife's parenting style, and then talking about how that's praised, but how you're different, but that's somehow either equal or better than. Because then he says, again, in the same breath practically, he talks about how, oh, well, you know, Usha's going to come and she sees my side sometimes. And she comes over and she understands that I do things right too. As if he's trying to say, like, she does things in some way that I don't agree with, and that my way is somehow superior in some degree, where she has to come to him rather than him go to her in terms of how to parent. that there's a problem with that. There's a problem with that, and I think it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot, I don't think. Because, unless, like, you're, like, a parent yourself, it's really difficult to see, like, how difficult it is to parent in a way that is, I guess, in what you might see as right, like respectful, softer and gentler, because toddlers, like, they're a lot, and the high-pitched screaming is a lot. When I was on a plane yesterday, I was on one of the legs of my flight home. There was the two toddlers in front of me, and they were screaming top of their lungs. I didn't care. I practically slept through the whole thing. I'm used to it. I live with it. But I can tell how scared and how concerned their parents were by how much they were trying to whisper to them to, like, hey, please calm down, or it's only 30 minutes, like, until we touch down, like, don't worry about it. Being unable to console their toddler. But you can tell they are being pressured by people around them, whether it's by looks or maybe, in the worst case, someone actually going up to them and telling something about that. You've seen that on planes, Jesse. Like, it's very common for people to kind of get really upset over kids on airplanes and start butting into where they frankly shouldn't belong. And to the parent, the parent's in the worst spot here, because it's their responsibility to get a handle on their kids, but they're the ones being, like, yelled at or screamed at by random strangers who think that they deserve a perfectly quiet airplane. And so I get it. I get that you're in a position where all the pressure's on you, and it's very tempting to raise your voice. It's very tempting to explode on a kid, right? Because all you want is for things to go the publicly proper way. And it's hard to see gentle parenting to be, like, the right avenue for that. And I believe it is. I believe there are ways to address this stuff in a gentle and calm way that does fix toddler tantrums. I've seen it. My wife does it all the time. She's really good at it. I've been learning how to do that, and it's really effective. It is honestly very effective. J.D. Vance himself admits that it's effective, because he admits that Usha does it, and it's very effective. And yet, what does he say in the same breath? Oh, well, I just fucking yell at them and curse at them, and that's just what I do, and that just works. And I'm like, no, you're missing the point. You are missing the point of the story that you yourself are telling. And so, what we should all agree on is that parenting has evolved. We've learned more. We continue to learn more over time about how to communicate with young children, toddlers. Again, 2-3 years old. Children don't know what you're saying when you're cursing at them. They don't know that's like an urgent thing. They don't know. They can't like comprehend the weight of what you're saying. All they're hearing is the tone in your voice. All they're hearing is you yelling at them. That's not a constructive way to get them to do what you want them to do, because they can't understand you. There's a reason why gentle parenting has had such an upsurge in parenting circles. It's because it's not about being like, oh, I'm soft, and I'm like a soft parent, give my kid whatever they want. It's not about that. It's about communicating with them in a way that they can understand. As a goddamn 2-year-old who won't have, like, proper memories for another 2 years, who doesn't even have a proper full language, can't speak in full sentences in some cases. They can't understand nuances in social etiquette. And they won't understand you if you're yelling at them and cursing at them. And so J.D. Vance saying this stuff as a joke, and then saying how it's implying how it's somehow, like, the better way to parent, is it speaks to an inherent issue that we have in parenting, and what a lot of parents have been trying to move past. It represents the old way of thinking. And we have to look at that as an example of why it's important to move past that old way of thinking when parenting, especially toddlers. I'm not talking about parenting all the way, because it's different. It's different. I do think that when you get to like middle childhood, teenagers, adults, I think it does change. Like parenting styles can change, and there's different ways to approach different situations. But when they're that young, there is scientific consensus over the effectiveness of certain methods of communication, and I think there's a scientific defense that yelling at a toddler doesn't fix a toddler's tantrum. Pretty sure I'm safe to say that. That's what I got for you. JD Vance, do better. Do better, JD.
Do better, JD. You're being a real Chuck Schumer right now. No, as a never parent, I obviously, have to factor that into this, into the way I receive this. Also, if you can hear the thunder behind me, we've got this fantastic thunderstorm. I promise I'm not, this is not a sound effect. That's real going on here. But
it's a New Hampshire ad.
Yeah, it should be. It's a gorgeous thunderstorm going on at the moment. It's interesting. I mean, is anyone surprised that J.D. Vance is a terrible parent? Like, I feel sorry for his wife. I feel sorry for his child. There's no way that he... I mean, just look at the way he acts and engages with people. It's so fake. It's so selfish. It's so self-centered. So I'm not surprised. But you're absolutely right. Like, this should not be the model for how you engage with your kid. And how you engage, certainly, with a child that young. It's just crazy. And you mentioned the plane thing, which is interesting, because my things we should all agree on relates to plane etiquette. But, yeah, I
it's going to be like, kids, shut the fuck up.
No, I as much as I sometimes would like to, I always think back to my dad. My dad, when we would ride on planes when I was a kid, when I would be flying with my dad periodically, he would always say, when I hear a baby on a plane, he's like, I don't get angry, I just feel sorry for that parent. It's like, because it's a helpless feeling to be in a situation. It's not, I feel sorry for the parent, I feel sorry for the kid. There's nothing, that's not something that's anyone's fault. If anyone, I agree, anyone that turns around and fucking interjects and shut that kid up or stuff like that, like, that's not helpful. Like, don't be a jerk. Like, this is a part of life. This is not something that they're choosing to do. The only time I have ever seen someone justifiably turn around and complain to a parent was on a flight from Doha, Qatar, to Boston, in which, literally, like an hour in, this girl sitting next to me, across the aisle from me, very young, probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6, just keeps kicking the crap out of the seat in front of her. And the parent sitting next to her never says anything. And at one point, the dude finally turns around and is like, if this is going to go on for the next 11 hours of this flight, we're going to have a problem. And that one, I thought he was very generous. Like, at a certain point, you do have to restrain your kid from, like, actively knocking somebody's, chair forward repeatedly. But off of that...
What you should have done before you left Qatar was ask for a jet. And then you could have just flown in, a nice gilded jet and not had anybody kicking you.
I'm sure. If my last name was Trump, that might have worked. But it is not, fortunately, for me and everyone. So on that note, I do want to talk about airline etiquette, being punched or kicked in the back. And my things we should all agree on this week is that airlines should not allow their seatback screens to have games on them. Why do I say this? Because when you put a game on the back of someone's seat, You are basically giving the passenger behind them permission to repeatedly jab that person in the skull. And I know this because I have been the skull. I have lived the skull experience. You're sitting there trying to relax, maybe reading a book, maybe drifting off to sleep, and then thunk. You know, at first you sit there, you think, oh, maybe they just adjusted their seat. Nope, thunk, thunk. And now you just realize they're playing some mindless seat-back version of Candy Crush or Tetris, and every single move is a tiny tap directly into your cranium. I don't even blame the people playing. Let's just be clear. Like, it's not their fault. I wouldn't do it, but it's not their fault. The temptation is right there. You've been trapped in a flying tube for 6 hours. There are no Marvel movies left to watch. And now the only remaining joy is trying to guide a pixelated penguin across some frozen wasteland. But here's the thing. Every time that fucking penguin moves, so does my brain. I can just feel it sloshing around. So, and then don't tell me, just lean forward, just recline your seat, because then I'm that asshole. Then I'm the selfish recliner, and that's a whole other moral battlefield. But here's my modest little proposal, airlines. You can keep the movies, keep the flight tracker, keep the little trivia quiz that nobody plays, but the games, the tap games, they gotta go. Or at least have them somewhere else, like a separate screen that pops down from the ceiling. You know, if you can have oxygen fall from the ceiling, you can have, you know, tap games fall from the ceiling. Or maybe, I don't know, or just, you know, fucking hand people a pack of cards and say good luck. Like, nothing ruins the miracle of human flight faster than being used as a human arcade cabinet. That's what I got for you. Stop playing the games. Get rid of the games. No more tap. No more Candy Crush. No more Tetris. No more poker. I love poker. Not on the back of my head. I don't love poker. It's not enjoyable, I can assure you. So, that's what I got. This one's been building up for a little while. It wasn't on the planes yesterday. This one was when I got on the planes yesterday. I started thinking about this again, how much it pissed me off last time because I couldn't sleep. So I was flying back from Europe, and some guy behind me, dunk, oh, I gotta play my Candy Crush. Oh, a top score. Oh, I gotta put in my name. Like, it's not like they're like good touchscreens either. Like, you gotta slam down to choose the movie in the first place. So, no. Stop this. Stop this insanity. Airlines, take those video games off of your screens. Please and thank you.
Well, Mayor Pete, if you want to win the general, I guess this is the platform for you, right? No tap.
Yes. Should have done it when you were transportation secretary. That should have been your top priority. I'm telling you, you know, these little things, these matter. So, yeah. Great job, Chuck Schumer. Great job. I'm blaming you for this. Come on the pod, Chuck.
Defend yourself. Defend your actions. Your taptions.
All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for this week. Thank you again so much to Kieara Kurtz-Williams. Fantastic discussion with her. We'll be back next week and every week, and we're available wherever you get your podcasts. You should know that because you've just listened to one. Follow us on Instagram at Reunited States Pod, and if there's topics that you want to hear from us, please let us know. We've been incorporating them as we go, so please, keep involved in the dialogue here. Look forward to having you guys back soon. With that, from Manchester, New Hampshire, I'm Jesse Saywell.
And from Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Erg.
And this has been United States.
When the whole world has got you down and there's no one else around, turn that frown right upside down.